The Galactic Council chamber fell into absolute silence as the golden doors swung open. Every species in the known universe had sent their finest delegates to witness this historic moment, the coronation of the Dragon Emperor's heir. The Zitharians, with their crystalline bodies, refracted the ceremonial light into 1,000 colors. The massive Chromoth warriors stood at attention, their armor gleaming. Even the ethereal whispers of Andromeda had manifested their consciousness into visible form for this occasion. At the center of it all sat Emperor Draction the Eternal, his scales shimmering with the deep purple hue of ancient royalty. He was dying, and everyone knew it. After ruling for 3,000 years, the Dragon Emperor's flame was finally dimming. Today, he would name his successor. The heir stepped through the doorway, and a collective gasp rippled through the chamber. She was small, impossibly small by galactic standards, a human. Her name was Mia, and she wore the traditional robes of the Dragon Court, which seemed to swallow her tiny frame. She couldn't have been more than 8 standard years old. Impossible, hissed Ambassador Velcris of the Serpent Collective. A human child. They barely live a century. How can she inherit an empire that spans millennia? But Emperor Draction had chosen her for reasons none could fully comprehend. 5 years ago, he had discovered Mia on a human colony world during a diplomatic mission. The child had been orphaned when her transport ship crashed, killing everyone aboard except her. Something in her eyes of fierce determination, an unbreakable spirit had moved the ancient emperor. He had taken her in, raised her, and now, against all tradition and logic, he was naming her his heir. Mia walked forward slowly, her small shoes clicking against the obsidian floor. The path to the throne was lined with dignitaries, each one more powerful and ancient than the last. Admiral Korthax of the war fleets bowed his massive head. Prime Archon Selinus of the council extended a graceful hand in blessing. Chancellor Morvex of the treasury worlds offered the ceremonial scepter. The child was supposed to acknowledge each one, to accept their pledges of loyalty, to ascend the 13 steps to the dragon throne where her adopted father waited. The entire ceremony had been choreographed down to the second. Every eye in the chamber watched her, waiting, but then Mia stopped. Her head turned sharply to the left, toward the shadowed alcoves where the palace servants waited. No one paid attention to that area. Servants were invisible during state functions, part of the architecture rather than participants in history. Mia's eyes locked onto a figure in the corner, a human man in a plain gray uniform, holding a cleaning implement. His name was Kevin, though no one in that grand chamber knew it or cared. He was a janitor, one of thousands of menial workers who kept the palace functioning. He had been positioned there to quickly clean any spills or disturbances during the ceremony. Protocol demanded he remain unseen, unnoticed, but Mia had noticed. Without warning, the child broke into a run. Not toward the throne, not toward her dying father. She ran toward Kevin, her ceremonial robes flying behind her like wings. The chamber erupted in confusion. Guards moved forward. Advisors shouted. Emperor Draction tried to rise from his throne, but weakness held him back. Mia crashed into Kevin with the full force of her small body, wrapping her arms around his waist and burying her face in his uniform. The janitor, shocked beyond words, froze completely. His cleaning tool clattered to the floor, the sound echoing through the stunned silence. Kevin. Mia's voice was muffled but clear. You came. You actually came. The man's withered face transformed. Tears began streaming down his cheeks as he slowly, carefully returned the embrace. Of course I came, little star. I promised, didn't I? Chancellor Morvex stepped forward, outrage clear in every line of his alien features. This is unacceptable. Guards, remove that. Wait. Emperor Draction's voice, though weakened, still carried the authority of 3 millennia. Every being in the chamber froze. The ancient dragon slowly descended from his throne, each step measured and painful. He approached the embracing pair and looked down at them with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. 5 years ago, when I found Mia in the wreckage of her ship, she was dying. The medical teams gave her hours at best, but there was one survivor who refused to accept that prognosis. Draction gestured to Kevin. This man, this mere janitor, worked for 72 hours without rest. using human medical techniques my advanced physicians had never considered. He sang to her when she cried. He held her hand when the pain was unbearable. He refused to let her slip away into the dark. Kevin looked up at the Emperor, still holding Mia. She reminded me of my daughter. I lost her in the same crash. I know, Draction said softly. And when I took Mia to be raised in the palace, you asked only one thing: to be allowed to work nearby, to watch over her from a distance. You never asked for recognition, never sought reward. For 5 years, you have been content to remain in the shadows, cleaning floors and emptying waste receptacles, just to catch glimpses of her in the corridors. The Emperor's massive head swung to face the assembled delegates. You wonder why I chose a human child to inherit an empire. This is why. Because humans possess something we have forgotten, something we have bred out of ourselves through millennia of genetic optimization and cultural refinement. They possess the ability to love unconditionally, to sacrifice without expectation, to find family not in blood or DNA, but in the bonds they choose to forge. Mia looked up at Kevin, then back at the throne, then at her adopted father. When she spoke, her child's voice somehow filled the entire chamber. Kevin taught me that the measure of a person, in their title or their species or how long they live, it's what they do when no one is watching. It's who they choose to be when being kind costs them everything and benefits them nothing. She turned to face the assembly. If I am to be your empress, my first decree is this: Kevin will serve as my grand advisor. Because I don't need advisors who know protocol. I need advisors who know what truly matters. The chamber remained silent for 3 heartbeats. Then Emperor Draction began to laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that shook the very foundations of the palace. One by one, the delegates began to bow, not to the throne, not to tradition, but to a child who had seen through all the ceremony and spectacle to recognize the only thing that truly mattered. Admiral Korthax was the first to speak. The Dragon Emperor chose well. Humanity may be young, may be brief, but they burn bright. We pledge our fleets to you, Empress Mia. As the pledges of loyalty cascaded through the chamber, Kevin knelt down to Mia's level. Are you sure about this, little star? I'm a janitor. Mia smiled the same fierce smile that had captured an emperor's heart 5 years ago. You're not just anything, Kevin. You're family, and that's worth more than all the thrones in the galaxy. Outside the palace, the stars burned cold and distant. But inside, humanity had reminded the universe of something it had forgotten: that love, loyalty, and compassion were not weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths to be celebrated. And under the guidance of a child and a janitor, perhaps an empire might finally learn what it truly meant to be civilized.